Welcome back to another edition of This Is Wrestling. No Lever Sage on this edition of the show. I think he's still trying to come to grips with the fact that I was correct from the Elimination Chamber review when it came to John Cena. I think he's coming to grips with that. He did want to go on another episode and try and explain himself away like he did earlier this week. And I think he decided to take a step back and reflect on how right I was. And so with that, we have reached our hand out and given the hot tag over to our AEW superfan to help us preview everything that's going to be coming up with AEW Revolution. It is Ben Soubliere. Ben, appreciate you coming on the show here.
Thanks for having me back. Lever Sage doing his best John Cena impression because we can't see him today.
That's right. That's right. You agree with me though. I'm not on an island here that I was correct when it comes to the John Cena pick.
Yeah, I mean, as much as he hates the name Cope, he was totally on copium that entire episode, because if you had each put $100 on who was going to win the Elimination Chamber, somebody's got their pockets empty and somebody's got their pockets full, and that, my friend, is you.
I knew I was dragging some weight around a little bit more than usual as I was walking around today, but nonetheless, but a reminder to folks, hashtag Zach was right. We all know what we all heard it over the last couple of months. I need some sort of victory here. We had the speed bubble on the way with Jey Uso, and but we finally got to the finish line when it comes to John Cena. But that's not what we're talking about here today. We've got AEW Revolution coming up this Sunday. I've been trying to make sure I've not been saying Saturday because now the NFL season is done and they are putting the pay-per-views back on Sunday. And I know that we have put our poor AEW superfan through hell over the last couple of weeks. It seems like there's a couple of jabs in between over the last couple of weeks, but finally, Ben, you have the opportunity to, fight back a little bit, throw some punches back. You're kind of bobbing and weaving in the corner, and now you're coming out of the corner and trying to fight with some flurries here.
Well, those that listen on the podcast can't see it, but I'm wearing my Jack Perry hat, and where Lee was like throwing in the Jack Perry references for like no reason while doing the Elimination Chamber preview and post recap episodes, yes. I was shocked. I was like, what is going on here? Why? Get the Jack Perry's name out of your mouth.
Well, I almost took the Jack Perry, you wearing the hat, as an attack on me, because Jack Perry has also been my nemesis, but for different reasons when it comes to this show, going back to predictions. But yes, it is. It's been a tough few weeks for the AEW superfan on our show, Ben Soubliere. But what the one thing that we do share an opinion on that we seem to differ from Lever Sage is that the recent weeks of AEW TV has been really solid, I thought. It's, again, I don't think it's anything where we're going back to 2021 and we're getting the full, basketball arenas or anything like that. But in terms of the storyline quality that we've been seeing the last few weeks, it feels like it's a lot more focused. It feels like the programs are starting to heat up a little bit. And we go into this Revolution card, and even without the build, I mean, on paper, and we usually say this a lot with these AEW pay-per-view cards, but especially in this instance, this looks like a really strong card heading into Sunday.
Yeah, I think the build has been awesome. I think I've said this for a while, that AEW was like in its prime when it had less pay-per-view shows and more time to breathe between big shows, which made their TV more important and gave you things to kind of do in between, like your like Grand Slams and your Homecomings and your Winter is Coming and all that sort of stuff. And so I think by having 10 weeks between pay-per-views, the TV has been better for it. The build has been better for it. And then the other thing that I really have enjoyed over the past couple of weeks is the venue selections.
Yes.
The really interesting looking venues, like even last night on Dynamite, very cool looking venue. They couldn't use their full stage. They couldn't have the tunnels. But the visual of the crowd and how rowdy that crowd was and how loud they sound in that arena just kind of led to the atmosphere of that show. And, something that's probably like just an average main event came across really well on TV because of how into the crowd, or how into the show the crowd was, and just like some of the acoustics of the arena.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Dynamite show yesterday. I thought the build for a lot of the feuds were well done, especially, and I'll kind of lead into this first match review here of Swerve Strickland versus Ricochet to determine the number one contender for the AEW World Championship. On TV, the way that this program has been played out, we had our initial quips about Ricochet and his ability to cut a promo, and it just seemed like at first when he arrived in AEW, he was just having a tough time finding out who he is. We all knew he could be a great pro wrestler, but in terms of who he is, in terms of the character that he wanted to portray, in terms of his personality, it never seemed to translate. But now with this heel run that Ricochet has been on, kind of embracing really his dorky side, and he certainly has done that to a T over the last couple of weeks, embracing the more dorkier side of him. And normally I wouldn't be too big of a fan of having more dorks on my TV, but Ricochet has kind of done a good job of playing it off and really embracing the role. And Swerve Strickland, obviously, we've been singing his praises on this show ever since he showed up in AEW, and an opportunity here for one of these men to be the number one contender for the AEW World Championship, and something for me where you finally have something different, or going back to one of those guys that kind of represent AEW potentially, and that might be a little tease for who I'm thinking is going to win this match. But Ben, kind of take us through the feud in your mind and your pick between the two of Swerve Strickland and Ricochet.
Yeah, honestly, I think I've said it out loud, but if not, I've definitely thought it to myself that I was like, did AEW really need to sign Ricochet? Yes, he's a great athlete and he's a good wrestler and all that sort of stuff, but on a roster filled with them, I was kind of thinking, like, where is he going to carve out this role? He's, if he was a babyface, he's not as good as Will Ospreay. He's not as good as Hangman Page or Kenny Omega. So where does he stand out? And I think you're right. He's kind of like dialed into this dorky persona that just kind of like grits on you. And it's a perfect foil for Swerve, where Swerve is just this like ruthless, Nana calls him the most dangerous man in AEW. It's just a great foil because as deadly serious as Swerve has been, Ricochet has been almost like the perfect counter to that, where he's doing his dorky things with his hat and his glasses and the scissors out of like the strangest like foreign object shot you can think of. So yeah, this build has been really cool. Whether it's the matches that we've kind of had along the way, I really enjoyed the main event last night. It was really cool to have like an all-star tag match kind of thing where there was no like storylines of like, oh, can they coexist? It was just straight up, yeah, these guys are fighting each other at the pay-per-view and they're going to do, one more blow-off match right before the show. And it was awesome. I really enjoyed the tag team stuff between Brody King and Swerve. And it was just such a fun match to lead into the pay-per-view. So I've been a big fan of this build.
Yeah, me too. It's I think it's been strong, and you kind of touched on it as well. I thought the crowd was really, really hot for Dynamite yesterday. One of the better crowds we've had in a while, and I think it helps when you have the smaller building to work with, where it's something different on TV, and acoustically, it sounds like the crowd is more invested as opposed to having 4,000 in a 15,000 seat building. So that helps out a lot. And this feud started off. It was a feud that I wasn't really interested in. It's kind of similar to you in the sense that where is Ricochet's role in all this? But I think he's really formed a character here that's working. And I've always enjoyed him in the ring and felt he was very underutilized in WWE. And I fully understand that he wasn't going to be used there because, again, they assumed as well, they presumed that there was probably nothing to work with when it comes to character work. But he's found his role. All that to say, based on what I've seen on Dynamite the last few weeks and this feud, I'm going to pick Swerve Strickland to get the victory here. I think it makes sense for him to ascend back into the world title picture and really kind of freshen things up. I'm big on having right now sort of your guys. And when I say your guys, I mean like your Hangman Pages, your MJFs, your Swerve Stricklands, guys that you look at and go, okay, those are AEW guys in your title picture right now. And I think it just makes sense for Swerve Strickland to do that. I know there's the tease as well. There was that promo from Nana saying, I can't do this anymore. If the way that he's been going after Ricochet and saying, if you can't get this done, I'm out. So I know there's that tease that's lingering in, but I think it's still too soon for that. I think that's just more to try and put more importance into the match. So I'm picking Swerve Strickland to get the victory here.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you, especially with Dynasty being 4 weeks away. I feel like that's a pay-per-view that hopefully going forward can kind of be synonymous with Swerve Strickland. It was the pay-per-view where he won his world title, came out with the embassy robe and all that sort of stuff. So I feel like if you're going to put Swerve Strickland into the title hunt, Dynasty is the perfect way to do it, which means he's winning this match.
Let's move on to another match that I'm looking forward to. It's not one of the high profile matches that we'll talk about here, but I think this could be one of those sleeper matches, depending on how one man is able to show up and the other we know he could consistently show up. And that's Kazuchika Okada and Brody King. I'm really excited for this match. I've been very impressed with Brody King over the last few months. They've been featuring him more, and I love just the big guy that's going out there and doing big guy things. Always been a big fan of that. And in the case of Okada, like, I know he's had some very good matches in AEW, but there's been times I felt like, especially when it comes to the TVs, and maybe it's just me having seen Okada in New Japan before and having this perception and this idea of what I think Kazuchika Okada is, that I would hope for more from him in this AEW run. And I think it's a combination of him and some of the booking that's happened for him in recent months. But I look at this match between the two, and I think this could be a really fun undercard match. And, you know, I assume with Okada being on pay-per-view, he's going to step up here. And Brody King, I don't doubt he's going to be somebody that can come in and show out as he has shown over the last couple of weeks. I've got Okada retaining here, but I think this should be a fun match.
Yeah, I've got Okada retaining as well because I think we're building to something much bigger down the road, which we can touch on after we go deeper into this card. Who do you think has the higher ceiling at this point in their career? Would you say it's Brody King, or would you say it's Alistair or Malachi Black? Because I feel like without Malachi Black to kind of tie Brody King to in terms of storylines and in terms of matchups and stuff like that, I'm really excited to see where he goes from here. His 2 showings in the Continental Classic I thought were awesome. He's just something that's a little bit different than the majority of the AEW roster.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not entirely surprised that they put him in a match with Okada because of the chemistry that he's kind of shown with a whole bunch of guys on the roster. So what do you think about ceiling-wise, him versus Malachi Black at this point?
I think I already know. I think I already see Malachi Black's ceiling. I think we've already seen it. Still could be a high-level wrestler when motivated, and could still be a mid-card, upper mid-card guy. But I think there's room to grow right now with Brody King, and like what you mentioned, with him now kind of out of the House of Black when it comes to the Malachi Black connection, there's kind of been this renewed sense of confidence with him as well. And I've noticed that not only with him, but also with Buddy Matthews, where it just feels like this anchor that's kind of been holding them down is finally gone, and they could feel like they can go out there and prove themselves, as opposed to being around this kind of dark cloud in Malachi Black that I personally kind of see him as. So I think the ceiling right now is higher. I think there's more you could do with Brody King. I think he's older than people think he is. I think he's in his late 30s. He's 37. So it's not like you're running out of time with him, but you got to start, if you want to see where he could end up, you got to start getting, the wheels in motion. But I still think there's more that could be shown with Brody for sure than I think with Malachi at their points in their career. And sorry, who'd you have retain there, Okada?
Yeah, I've got Okada retaining because of where I think this is heading into. Y'all in the summer.
Y'all in, that's right. In Texas, Globe Field, where the Rangers play. I imagine one of those people that will probably have a presence is a cowboy that we know pretty well in AEW, and that is Hangman Page and MJF. And for me, this has been the best built feud of all the card. For me personally, it's certainly the one that I've enjoyed the most. I think these two, in terms of talking about who is the main guy for AEW, and MJF trying to point out the hypocrisy on Dynamite last night, trying to light the Hangman on fire, was quite the visual, but makes sense to me in this weird, goofy world of pro wrestling. But I think this has been such a great turn from MJF in terms of getting off of the feuds with Jeff Jarrett and Dustin Rhodes, getting himself back into a featured program, and for Hangman Page as well, getting himself into a featured program. I think these two have had such a great build. A lot of this build honestly reminds me, and I know I said we're probably not back in the 2021 Dynamites, but this build kind of reminds me of a big time build from that era. And I've really enjoyed how it's kind of built up, and I think there's more that could be done here. So with that, I'm going to pick MJF to get the victory over Hangman Page. I think there's still more that they could do here, and I think this could be a feud that could carry over into All In. I think there's more that they could build up on this and really make this as one of the defining feuds for the company. So I think in order to do that, I think MJF is going to get the victory in some sort of cheap MJF victory that we usually see from him, whether it be the ring or whatnot. And I see a lot of potential in this blossoming into bigger things, so I'm picking MJF.
Yeah, I think with Hangman, one, he's pretty much bulletproof in terms of needing to win and his losses. And I know about a month ago, I want to say Lee had said on the show, what are they doing with Hangman Page? What are they doing with MJF? What are they doing with Swerve? And I think given the runway to get to this pay-per-view, all these guys are in meaningful feuds right now, which is awesome. And with the short turnaround time to the next pay-per-view, I wonder how many rematches or different combinations of these matches we end up seeing again. For this one, it's a pick'em for me. I could go MJF, like you said, with the Dynamite ring or heel tactics, if you want to call them, or maybe you're heating Hangman back up even more than he already has been. I'm going to take Hangman only because you don't typically light a guy on fire and then, or try to light the guy on fire and then win the next match. So just kind of in terms of stereotypical wrestling booking, I'm going to say Hangman pulls out something, but it wouldn't surprise me if MJF took the win as well.
Yeah, it is close, and but I think there's more to do with this, and I think MJF winning would make sense on that. But I could see your viewpoint there. So that is the MJF Hangman Page match. Again, I think this has been the strongest build for me personally, and certainly the match I'm most looking forward to, or at least one of the matches I'm most looking forward to. Because again, this is a stacked card, and to really showcase how this is a stacked card, Konosuke Takeshita taking on Kenny Omega for the AEW International Championship. At the time when these two faced off, when Takeshita pinned Omega at All In, and then pinned him again at All Out, this time in a singles match clean, I was hoping at the time that they would follow up with this. And they never really did with Takeshita and Omega. And it took them some time before Takeshita finally got back in the swing of things, obviously becoming the international champion. And now they're going back to this feud, a match that I think has the potential to be the best match of the night, considering both the caliber of wrestlers, but there really is a lot of matches here that could potentially be the match of the night. A match I'm really looking forward to. I've always been somebody that's been a big proponent of the one guy you can't really beat. You just have a tough time beating every time you try. You try different ways, you just can't beat him. I like that idea with this Takeshita and Kenny Omega stuff, where Takeshita's just the guy that Kenny Omega can't seem to beat. And so I'm going to pick Takeshita here to retain. I think Omega's... I would love to see an international championship win for Omega here, but I'm going to pick Takeshita to retain and continue holding on to the belt. And I think Omega will still kind of hang around because, like you mentioned, there still will be a quick turnover. I'm sure fans would be more than happy with another match between these two. So I'm going to pick Takeshita to retain here.
So I'm going to work backwards a little bit, take the Lever Sage special,
There you
and
go.
work backwards from All In. And we've already got the tease of Okada and Omega for All In from when I think it was Omega's return to Dynamite. And there's rumors that they want to merge the International and the Continental Championship. So if I'm working backwards from there, and we've got 3-4 months, probably off on my math on that, less than 6 months build
Yep.
to All In. How do we get there? And I think the answer is Omega becomes the first, what I would consider like Grand Slam champion in, or Triple Crown champion, whatever you want to call it, in AEW, where he will be the first person to hold the main title, the World Championship, the Trios title, the Tag title, and then a secondary belt. Um, so for me, I'm taking Omega in this match, thinking that at some point we're going to be on that collision course between Okada and Omega again, and that if they are going to merge those championships, um, that's the way to do it, is to do it with Omega and Okada. Also, I feel like they did something very convoluted in this feud by inserting that Orange Cassidy match in it, and I feel like that was done to give Takeshita some credibility heading into the pay-per-view where he might take the loss. And to your point, they could run this back again in a month and be all the better for it. But I'm going to take Omega in this match to set the wheels in motion for that match at All In.
Interesting. I don't see a merger personally between the belts. I see your point. I do see with Okada and Omega, certainly that would be for the Continental Championship. And I think that's where you could just have the appeal there, just how long Okada has held that belt. But that's an interesting idea in terms of potentially merging the International and Continental Championship. Could be interesting. One thing's for sure that we both can agree on. I think this is going to be a real fun match when this airs.
Yeah, you said it. There's honestly 3 or 4 matches on here that could be match of the night, and I'm super excited for this card. I think back to what Revolution was last year, and it was a fantastic card as well, with that finale to Sting's career. And I think just from top to bottom, this might be one of the best cards in a while in terms of the quality of matches we're going to get. Um, Obviously, we'll go into some of the other matches in a couple minutes, but I think out of the ones that you've kind of mentioned so far, being Swerve and Ricochet and Okada and Brody, and then Takeshita and Omega, I wouldn't be surprised if any one of those matches ended up being match of the night. And I just love Takeshita. There's just something about him and his style and his size and how fluid he is in the ring. And I just find he brings out like really good chemistry with some of these guys. His match with Osprey last year was unbelievable and one of my favorite matches of the year. And again, followed it up with matches against Omega, and just has been this like steam train of momentum throughout the year. And the Don Callis family has kind of like lingered around in various incarnations, but I think him and Fletcher, just their look, their in-ring ability, it's just awesome. So I'm kind of hoping at some point we see them as like a legitimate tag team and take a run at the tag team titles down the line. But yeah, I'm hyped for this entire card.
Yeah, it's looking really good. Quick 2 points here that I want to ask you before we go on to the other match that I think has the potential to be a match of the night candidate. One, obviously, the build up for this has been, it was announced during the Grand Slam Australia show that Omega cut the promo challenging Takeshita. Then they had Takeshita go through the rounds to try and retain the belt. I think I know the answer to this question, but do you feel that was the right approach to go with this, or do you think that they could have done this a little bit differently? Because I know you mentioned in there that they threw in the Orange Cassidy match to kind of give a little bit of credence and credibility to Takeshita, but I don't think you really needed that personally. But what do you think?
I think that they should have taken advantage of the time delay release and gone back and looked at it and been like, oh, wait, this doesn't make any sense. We should shoot something else.
Yes.
Because they had that opportunity. It was a backstage segment and they had to put together their show. And they had that opportunity. And I feel like somebody should have tapped, Tony Khan on the shoulder and be like, does this actually make any sense? Like, I get what they were trying to do. They were trying to, the international championship has been like the workers belt.
Mhm.
And I think that's what they were trying to kind of promote, was that, like you're going to get Takeshita and Omega, but before that, you're still going to get some good matches leading into it. And they just overcomplicated it. It was really something super simple. Kenny Omega could have just said, I'm coming for the international championship, and whoever's champion, at Revolution, I'm coming for you. And then it probably wouldn't have been as convoluted. Or you could have just not had anything and eventually just get to this match and just build it up properly.
Yeah.
So a bit of a speed wobble there in terms of the build to Revolution. Is it the end of the world? No, I loved the match between Takeshita and Orange Cassidy. So I don't know. I've got a simple approach to my wrestling fandom. Give me good matches and I'll watch.
Yeah.
So
Sounds a
I
lot
can,
like me there, Ben. It
yeah,
sounds a lot like me when it comes to that approach.
yeah,
Um,
and it's I don't need like and so what I would compare it to is like, Zach, what's your favorite movie of all time?
First film that comes to mind is Aliens.
Oh, great selection.
Yeah, I love that movie.
Then why do you hate my dog?
I know Ripley. No, the Ripley doesn't like me. I love your dog. She doesn't share the same opinion though. The dog's got heat with me. It's unbelievable. It's like
So where I was going with this is wrestling and movies are art and they're subjective, and you can have a different taste for what you like, and ultimately it'll be up to you to determine what is your favorite and what appeals to you. So for me, I treat wrestling like a John Wick movie. Not everything needs to make sense. Give me some good action, and I'm pretty happy.
yeah,
And that's not to say John Wick is my favorite movie, but I know what I'm getting out of it when I go to watch it. And so, like, to hear people like, let's say, Bully Ray try to explain why uh, tickets sold and ratings are the most important thing, and that doesn't matter if a good match, how good of a match it is, and it doesn't matter if it's a 5-star rating because um, it's about the moment, and I couldn't disagree more because of what appeals to wrestling for me, which is like the actual competition. So when it comes to things like the buildup of the storyline and a couple of the miscues that I think Lee has been harping on for what feels like since you said since we chatted about since his trip to Collision in Florida,
yeah.
where he maybe listened to too many podcasts along the way. I feel like he's kind of let all of the negatives kind of
Bubble
take
to the
control.
surface.
Yeah, just bubble up. And for me, I whatever. If something doesn't make perfect sense, whatever. As long as I'm getting good wrestling out of it, I don't really care.
Yeah, it might not be 100%, but as long as you're getting to that end point. But yeah, it's interesting. I was waiting for when Bully Ray and Busted Open Radio would get a mention during the review. So.
Oh man, he keeps saying like he wants somebody to call him up and talk to him and like debate him, and I honestly meant to do it this week to see if I could get through. And I just hate Bully Ray. I've hated Bully Ray since I watched from like the front row of a SmackDown show at the Civic Center where he just berated this like fan who had some sort of disability and like couldn't defend himself. And ever since then, I'm like, I get it, you're a heel, but like pick somebody else. Pick me who was sitting beside this guy and yelling at you.
Yeah.
So like I already have this like negative connotation of who Bully Ray is, and seeing him again on LFG and his whole disrespectful won't shake people's hand thing. The shtick
Yeah.
is getting so old.
Yeah, I brought that up on the show too. I wasn't a big fan of that. Ben, don't hold back though. Don't hold back your thoughts about Bully Ray and how you're feeling about him. Tell the people how you really feel when it comes to Bully Ray.
Man,
he's not my favorite either. I'll just say that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he's rubbing off on Grifter Sage, and it pains me.
I was waiting for that nickname too.
Each week, I'm listening, and I'm like driving, and I'm like, why am I getting angry? Like, I enjoy listening to this show, and just some of the disingenuousness of it, where people just hold AEW to two completely different standards with WWE. And I don't go out of my way to bash WWE. I've actually enjoyed some of their stuff lately. I enjoyed the Royal Rumble. I really enjoyed the ladder match between Cody and Kevin Owens.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoyed the Jey Uso and Walter build. Oops, sorry, Gunter
there you
build.
Go.
So like there's like I don't go out of my way to bash WWE or compare the two because it's like comparing, a Michael Bay movie to any like a John Wick movie. If I'm going to go back to that explanation.
Yep.
Where Michael Bay movies have a lot of flash and they make a lot of money, but it doesn't appeal to everybody, and that's okay. So that's as much as I'm going to say about Bully Ray in terms of his takes on professional wrestling and what he deems as the most important parts of it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with a lot of what you said either, and you are not the only one that shares some negative thoughts about Bully Ray. I think Batista even had in his book a whole chapter dedicated how much Bully Ray was a jerk. I think the title of the chapter was literally called "Bully Ray is a bleep hole." So, so I think it's okay. I don't think you're on an island on that. Certainly not with me. I certainly have some thoughts about him. But you're talking about films. Let's talk about cinema here, Ben. Let's talk about Timeless Tony Storm and Mariah May. And the build to this, I've been pretty vocal of how much I've not been a fan of this, of these two. I don't like the Timeless Tony Storm character. I don't think Mariah May has really stepped up to be the women's champion she could have been before she lost the title to Tony Storm. So I look at this and it's not appealing to me personally, but I would be what's the word I'm looking for? I would be I would be turning I wouldn't be acknowledging that it has been built and fans are reacting to it. How about that? I'm trying to find the right word for that. Like, I know that fans are reacting to it.
You would be ignorant to say so.
Ignorant. That's the word I was looking for. I would be ignorant in saying that, yes, fans are, you see the chatter about this online and you see your fans that enjoy it. Personally, I think it's been a little overstated in terms of how much crowd interaction there's been and how much they've loved it, but that's neither here nor there. I thought I wasn't as big of a fan of the video that they shared, because when you're trying to do this super serious, I'm gonna beat you, and then you've got Tony Storm doing that voice, doing that gimmick is like, I'll give you something worse than death. Blah, blah, blah. I don't love that. I don't love that at all. Where you're trying to give a serious promo. That's the issue when you try and do a comedy thing and try and make it a little bit deeper, is that it's tough to translate when you have to get to those serious moments to build an angle, build a feud. All of that to say, fans seem to be enjoying it more than I do. It's a Falls Count Anywhere match, according to my run sheet for the Women's World Championship. Timeless Tony Storm, Mariah May. I am fingers crossed hoping this is the end and the World Championship, the Women's World Championship, can get out of this void, because for however I may feel about this feud and however the fans feel about the feud, I think it's time for the Women's World Championship to kind of be out of this feud and moving into a different direction. I'm interested to hear your thoughts about this feud here, Ben, and who you feel is going to come away with the championship.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm as high on it as a lot of people are, but I've enjoyed the build. Mariah May has been basically on every week since this feud kind of started. I mean, if you think about before they actually started feuding, it's almost been like over a year of her being on TV like all the time. So I feel like as good as I think the build has been, and I think this match has an opportunity to have like a good finale, I think Mariah May would probably benefit from some time away, and not just like time away from like wrestling or from the show, more just to like recover after like a busy year for somebody that probably has never wrestled so much in her life. So in this match, I'm leaning towards Tony Storm winning, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was kind of a. Do you ever watch the show Hannibal? Like the way Hannibal ends up finishing. Spoiler alert for those that are in the middle of watching Hannibal, but the show's been off the air for like 10 years. Literally ends with like Will Graham and Hannibal diving off a cliff together, and I'm like, I wonder if we're gonna get some sort of finale like that where it's definitive, that the feud is over, but maybe not the match itself has a definitive ending, with it being like a Falls Count Anywhere. So I've enjoyed it for what it is. Again, the cinematic stuff isn't necessarily my cup of tea, but I can appreciate it in small doses. So I'll take Tony Storm for the win. And like you said, hope that this kind of concludes the feud, because I think at some point in the last year, it's kind of switched where the AEW Women's Championship used to be like the working belt, and the TBS title was kind of the flashy belt, and you had your Jade Cargills and your Julia Harts and your wrestlers that weren't necessarily as polished in the ring, competing for it. And it flipped at some point where now with Mercedes Moné being the champion and Willow before and the feud with Chris Statlander and all that sort of stuff, the TBS championships kind of become the worker belt. And at some point, I think you need to kind of inverse that again so that your women's world title is more important than the TBS title.
Yeah, I'm going to pick Toni Storm to get the victory here as well. I think you make an interesting point as well of just the two championships there, the TBS championship and the women's world championship, the switch in terms of philosophy on how those belts are booked. At the end of it, though, I do think this women's world championship needs a new direction. And you were saying it's been a year of Mariah May. Boy, have I felt every single day of that, of her on TV and Timeless Toni Storm. And, I've said my piece about it. I've got Timeless Toni Storm retaining. Hopefully we could get into a different direction. Kind of sticking with the women's theme here, we'll go to that TBS championship match. Mercedes Moné versus Momo Watanabe. I am unfamiliar with Momo Watanabe, but thankfully, thanks to the listeners on this show, I was able to reach out to the Trevor Struthers, who's a viewer of Joshi, particularly Stardom, and I asked him for a quick synopsis of what to expect from Momo Watanabe this Sunday. And what I got was a stiff offense, tends to be one of the best Joshi workers as she often elevates her opponents. She's only 24 years old and has been wrestling for a decade. Pretty underrated. She's been underutilized by Stardom in the last few years. So some pretty big praise coming from the Trevor. And he also recommended me a match to watch, which I will try and catch later on from a recent Stardom show a few days ago. I think it was a Loser Leaves a Stardom match between Tam Nakano and another wrestler that's escaping me, but I will try and watch that as well. But all that to say, I've heard some good things about Momo Watanabe. This will be my first exposure to her. And obviously Mercedes Moné. I don't think the promos have gotten there quite yet in terms of the turnaround, but I certainly think the wrestling has. I think she's been very good with the opponents that she's been given. I still feel like with her promos, they're still very WWE-esque, and I feel like it's holding her back. And she's not the greatest promo to begin with anyways, but it feels like she's kind of sticking in a comfort zone. And quite frankly, this comfort zone isn't the greatest when it comes to promos. But in terms of the match itself, I'm fascinated to see how it'll go, because this could be, based on what I've heard from the Trevor and what I've heard about Momo Watanabe, this could be a fun little match, and I think it might surprise some people and open some eyes to the world of Joshi. So, but all that to say, I think this is a pretty easy Mercedes Moné retain here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree in terms of Moné is going to retain. I think what'll be interesting for me is I feel like Mercedes has actually dragged a couple of her more recent opponents kind of like into the fight and elevated them. So to hear that Momo kind of does the same, where she gets the best of her out of her opponents, has me excited. I kind of am going into this kind of how I was feeling about the Stephanie Vacour match, where didn't know a ton about Stephanie Vacour, but like right off the hop, there was like instant chemistry, and you could tell both were like really good workers. And so that's where I'm hoping that I will be pleasantly surprised with this match. I have enjoyed over the past couple months the dynamic of Mercedes facing off against kind of bigger bases for her to do her stuff with. But I also really enjoy her Lucha Libre stuff. So to kind of mix the Lucha Libre with some Joshi sounds like a really interesting combination. So going into it with like very little expectations in terms of what we're going to get out of it. But hope that I will be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, for sure. Could be interested to see how it goes from there. Let's go to the steel cage match. Will Ospreay versus Kyle Fletcher. This has been a feud that's, I think they've done a really good job of over the last couple of months, and really have been helping elevate Kyle Fletcher here to a level where I could see him as a legitimate guy that could contend for other title belts after this Will Ospreay feud. I think they've done a tremendous job. I think he's done a great job of giving himself a distinct look. There's always been talk about Kyle Fletcher as being somebody that could go to that next level and be a player. And we're finally kind of seeing it come to bloom here with Kyle Fletcher. Been so impressed with him. I will even go as far to say I think he's one of the best wrestlers in the world as well. I will go even that far. I think he's that good. And I was somebody on this show. I said keep an eye out on Aussie Open, especially with Kyle Fletcher, because that's a really strong tag team, one of the better tag teams in the world as well. And unfortunately, I would have liked to have seen more with Aussie Open, but when you have Mark Davis getting injured, it kind of halts those plans. But they moved forward with Fletcher, and he's really stepped up. And what else can I really say about Will Ospreay at this point that hasn't been said before? The guys, you want to talk about Kyle Fletcher, in my mind, being one of the best wrestlers in the world. Will Ospreay is the best wrestler in the world. And I say that with no hesitation when it comes to him. And I think this could be a really, really fun match, really heated match. And I don't see Kyle Fletcher winning this match. And I think that will be okay, because I think they've already gotten what they've needed to with Kyle Fletcher. I think he's already taken that next step to be a guy. And just from the rules of wrestling, usually you want your top babyface to win in the end. And I think that's what's going to happen here in the steel cage match, where Will Ospreay ultimately gets the victory. And I am picking him in the steel cage match here, Ben.
So you think that Kyle Fletcher is one of the best wrestlers on the planet?
Yes.
I 1,000,000% agree with you.
There you go.
He is the total package, and he is just, we have watched him figure it out over the past year. Probably controversial take. I think my favorite match of last year was that Kyle Fletcher and Will Ospreay match, where Fletcher like basically dominated him and got the clean pin, and I literally jumped out of my seat and was like, oh my god, like they are strapping the rocket to this guy. And I think he's got the highest ceiling in all of professional wrestling right now at 26 years old.
Totally agree.
So like when you think about where he was a year ago, and yeah, like you said, Aussie Open, I was really excited to see them as a tag team, and then Davis gets hurt, and you kind of were like a little bit worried for Kyle Fletcher, being like, where is he going to go? Is he going to be like the sidekick, the Bucky to Will Ospreay's Captain America? And he's just turned his entire career around, and he's in like phenomenal shape. So that's the other thing. He kind of like shaved the goofy hair and like has clearly gotten really serious about what he's doing. And he's also one of the best wrestlers on the planet. So you take in his age, his look, his size, and even his like mic work. He is just this total package. And I'm just an absolute huge fan. This is my most excited match of the night. Will Ospreay's never been in a proper steel cage match. I was listening to Chris Van Vliet, and he talked about he's never been in like a proper one. He's been in one with United Empire that was kind of a steel cage match, and another one somewhere in the UK. But he said he's never been in like a proper, what we would kind of consider a steel cage match. And so I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see the chemistry between him and Fletcher, because it's just off the charts. So like this is my most anticipated match of the night. Kind of in I'm kind of surprised on how far away from each other we are on the pick'ems, which I guess is kind of good, because it means that there's lots of different ways they can go in these storylines. And I have Fletcher winning this match, and the reason for it is I'm trying to like piece together where we're going with things, and it was something that Ospreay had said on Insight, and it was that he's never really wrestled Hangman Page. And so I'm trying to think like what are we eventually getting to? And like when is that going to occur in the next little while? Because if that's a match that he wants, it's a match that's eventually going to happen. He wanted the match with Swerve, and it got booked within like a month of Swerve's title reign. So I'm taking Fletcher here because they've got the Don Callis family, and because it's a steel cage match. And yes, the gimmick is so nobody's supposed to be able to interfere, but with the entire Don Callis family at his disposal, I'm going to take Fletcher. And I'm, I could be wrong, and it probably will be Ospreay, but I just think that Fletcher will gain a whole lot out of this. And if Ospreay were to win, like, how do you keep him out of the title picture? Because you got to figure out, when are you putting the title on Will Ospreay? And is it going to be at All In? Are you really going to have him win in like an American audience? when you've had the opportunity to have him win at Wembley and all that sort of stuff. So my thought is, I'm not wrong in thinking this, right? That Forbidden Door is in the UK.
Forbidden Door is in the UK, yes.
So I'm trying to think about what the all-in card is going to be, and when are you going to crown Will Ospreay as your champion? And my thought is maybe you have him win the title at Forbidden Door, and he goes into all-in main event as the champion. And so trying to work backwards from that, I just think a win over Kyle Fletcher in the steel cage match like vaults him into that title picture sooner than I think he needs to be if you're trying to line that up. So for that reason, I'm taking Fletcher. But honestly, along with a couple other matches on this card, like I could totally see it going the other way.
Yeah, this is a match I'm really looking forward to, and I will add this about Fletcher too. You want me to stoke the flames of WWE fans' ire with this next take? Because I've got a take about Fletcher. I think everything that's said about Randy Orton, from the come up to how he is as a worker and look, I think all of that is what Kyle Fletcher actually is. How about that?
So I will say, like early on, Randy Orton, I think was really good when he was motivated and he didn't get too comfortable.
The Mick Foley match comes to mind when it comes to the early stuff. Yep.
Yeah, and it wasn't like basically probably shortly after his first title run where he really settled into like the same sort of formula of having matches that I think he's kind of taken his foot off the gas for the last 15 years. But yeah, I would agree. Like, I know there's going to be comparisons between Kyle Fletcher and Randy Orton just because of their look.
Yep.
But Kyle Fletcher is on a different planet than where Randy Orton was at this age.
Yep. I think he's already better than Orton, to be quite frank with you as well. But that's also how I view Orton is very different than how other people view Orton. But
fear the rest hold.
Yeah, the rest hold and the stomps and the and the pose that he does on the top of the rope and all that. And then you have to hear people talk about what a great worker he is and all that. Doing the same match he's been doing for the last 10 years. But nonetheless, this is not that kind of podcast. I'll save that Randy Orton rant for when he wrestles at Mania and eventually wrestles Kevin Owens and or Sami Zayn. So get excited for that. Before we get into, sorry, was there something else you wanted to mention there, Ben?
I was just going to say that probably a couple weeks ago, probably the last time that they had a casino gauntlet match, you guys were talking about sometimes like the too many of the same match types, kind of the frequency of it.
Yeah.
And I think the steel cage match has been pretty well protected in AEW, which is another reason that I'm excited by this pay-per-view and this match in particular, in that there really hasn't been too many, especially on just like on a pay-per-view. Obviously, Swerve and Hangman had one in the fall, but it is a match type that doesn't get used as frequently as some of the other ones, like ladder matches and the casino gauntlet as of late. So I'm really excited to see what Ospreay and Fletcher can do in it, because one, Ospreay is going to want to jump off something, and two, these guys are going to go balls to the walls. So I'm so pumped for this match.
Yeah, same here. All right, so before we get to the main event, I want to quickly get through a couple of these matches. First, let's go for the final match on the main card before we get to the main event, and that's the Hurt Syndicate versus the Outrunners. I've been on this show saying how much I love the Outrunners. Love that gimmick. I love the promo video that they did on Dynamite this week. The old Memphis-style music video where they're doing the montage. That's my stuff in wrestling. That is cinema to me, okay? How they put that together. But having said all that, despite how much I love the Outrunners, I don't think they're a world champion tag team in my mind. I think they are a fun undercard tag team that you could showcase on your TV. They get the big pops, and you could utilize them for heat for some of the heels. And I think that's what they're being utilized for here against the Hurt Syndicate. I think there's still more to do in terms of building the Hurt Syndicate and continue this tag run. And so I'm picking them to retain.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the Outrunners could be one of those teams that you could give like a very, very short title reign to as like a surprise on like a random show, almost like they should have done with the Acclaim when the Acclaim were at their like peak.
Yep.
And unfortunately, they kind of like missed the peak of their popularity. They did course correct eventually, but I feel like they could be like, oh my god, they won on Dynamite, and then lose like 2 weeks later at the pay-per-view. Not going to happen here because I think the Hurt Syndicate has made a nice home for themselves in the tag division. And is this match going to last more than 8 minutes? Probably not. And I think I've said this before out loud. I've been impressed with Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin, two guys that I was like, again, do they really need to be in AEW? And they do bring something a little bit different than the rest of the roster. They're bigger guys, and with the combination with MVP, it works. So obviously, I'm taking Hurt Syndicate here, plus or minus. We'll put the plus the betting odds on over under of like 8 minutes in the match.
There you go. There you go. Not only are we getting a prediction, but we're also getting over unders in terms of the time of the match too as well. This is what you get here on the prediction show for AEW Revolution. One thing you have to also mention with the Hurt Syndicate here, Ben, is that they hurt people.
Oh yeah, they hurt people.
They hurt
people. Hurt people.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other match I want to touch on, maybe your favorite match, my favorite match, everyone's favorite match, Big Boom AJ and the Conglomeration taking on Johnny TV and MXM Collection in the AEW 0 Hour pre-show. We're getting the Costco guys back. I give that 5 booms out of 5 in terms of his return. Do you have any sort of thoughts about this pre-show match? Who are you feeling in this match here? Are you feeling the boom or are you feeling the doom here, Ben?
There's a reason I don't watch a lot of pre-show, whether it's in AEW or WWE, because it is nonsensical sometimes, and that's what this match is. Yeah, I love Orange Cassidy. I love Mark Briscoe. So I'll watch pretty much anything that they're in. But yeah, not super excited for this match. And if you want to make a lot of money, if somebody would actually take this bet, bet on the Orange Cassidy and the Boom.
Yep. Big Boom AJ. He's going to bring the boom. That's what he do. He brings the boom there, Ben.
And he brings the boom to me and you.
That's right. Get your chicken bake ready. Get your double chunk chocolate cookie ready as you sit down on your TV and realize the Costco guys are somehow still a thing in March of 2025. And Tony Khan is still very much invested in having Big Boom AJ on our screens. So there you go. In front of an LA crowd too. So
do you think Lee even knows like what they're famous for?
I think he has a sense. I do think he has a sense of what they're famous for. I think it's one of those, he saw it on like one of his feeds one time and he came to the determination, I know what this is. I don't need to know anything more about the Costco guys, and just moving on. I don't think he's a big Justice fan or anything like that, or the Rizzler fan, you know. Will the Rizzler show up? That's the big question.
Oh, yeah, that's a good prop bet right there. Is the Rizzler gonna make an appearance?
Apparently he injured his hand ringing the bell. That's what I saw a report come out about that.
Oh man, I thought that was fake. If that's real,
I could be wrong.
Oh,
I gotta tell you, I quite frankly didn't care enough to look deep into it. In terms of if it was a shoot injury or a work injury, or if the Rizzler is one of the best workers in all of wrestling and trying to sell an angle. But nonetheless, I will give this match 5 booms out of 5. I'm going to pick up Big Boom AJ and the Conglomeration to get the victory. All right, enough stalling. Let's get to the main event. What will likely be the main event. Jon Moxley taking on Adam Copeland for the AEW World Championship. This feud, not a lot of people fan of the Death Riders. It's been a group that Lee and myself as well have not been a big fan of. It seemed like they had lost their way from the initial setup of this group. But I gotta say here, Ben, I think the last couple of weeks, they turned it around. I want to say, I don't think it's great. I don't think it's awesome, but I think we're in a better spot with this group than we were a month ago. How about that?
Yeah. I think that's pretty much AEW in a nutshell.
Yeah.
That the time between World's End and Revolution has like been a good opportunity for them to kind of reset some of the storylines and build on some of the other ones. So yeah, I think like you said, especially the last couple of weeks where they've had a little bit more focus of like Cope picking off the Death Riders,
Yep.
has actually worked. Whereas I wasn't too sure about this match heading into it.
Yeah, and it's kind of led to more of an unpredictability, I think, in terms of like, can Cope beat John Moxley? We've been hearing about how maybe, this gimmick has not taken on and they might just move forward with it and just put the belt on Cope. But Ben, I need to hear from you that we won't get a cash in the main event. I need to hear from you we will not get a Money in the Bank style cash in the main events, and we're going to get an Edge and Christian program in the year of our Lord 2025, where Christian will win the belt and Cope will have to fight his old friend Christian Cage, I should say, his AEW name. And that is how we end the show. Please tell me, Ben, we are not getting a WWE style angle to finish off the show.
I won't say that we're not getting a WWE style angle, but I will say that Moxley still walks away with the championship.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
So here, I've had this in my mind for a while, and it's probably not going to happen, but shoot or shoot, right?
Right.
At some point, you're going to have Edge and Christian, Cope and Christian, reunite for one more run in AEW. I don't think there's any way that they both, retire, will go off into the sunset without that happening at some point. And I feel like this would be the perfect opportunity to do it, especially with All In kind of in the distance and building up to that and thinking about what match you could put on there or what attraction you could have at All In to kind of bring in some eyeballs and some butts and seats. And so my prediction for this match is that Moxley will retain. We will get the attempted cash in, and the match will start, but ultimately Christian will not win and will get, the bag put over his head as Cope is like helpless to defend him. And basically the Death Riders will get their retribution on Cope. They'll have him like handcuffed to the ring and put the bag over Christian's head. And that's kind of how the pay-per-view ends, which eventually sets up the Cope and Christian reunion.
Interesting. So you are calling for a Cope and Christian reunion, but not for the World Championship.
Nope, not for the World Championship. I think they'll go on a tag team run at some point.
Okay.
Where I think they've been out of each other's business for a long enough now, due to Cope's injury, and that feud kind of had some finality to it. So I feel like you don't need to necessarily rehash that. And to your point that you've been making with Lee in previous shows, the AEW Championship hasn't been seen since the fall.
Yep.
And the next time you see it, it's going to be on, Cope and Christian is your feud. And I get that the casual fans and the eyeballs and all that sort of stuff, but I think that if your championship hasn't been seen in X amount of time, you want somebody that kind of represents the brand better and like the youth movement and like the people that are going to be in the company for a while to represent it. So in terms of working backwards from All In and where I think Ospreay will eventually win the title, I think he has to take it off of Moxley. He talked about in his interview, the old ace versus the new ace. And so I feel like that's got to happen, and that it needs to be for the most important belt in the company. And how do you get to that match if Christian or Cope are champion? I don't know. So I'm going to take Moxley and a failed cash-in.
All right. Interesting. You actually have me thinking here, because I was going into this thinking we are going to get a cash-in, and I was going into this thinking Christian's going to win the belt. And I thought I was going into this because I know Lee talks a big game about working backwards, but I like to work backwards as well. And I was thinking maybe they go work backwards and they reignite the Christian Cage Swerve Strickland feud for the world title. You have Swerve beat Christian for the title after, you have Copeland. He gets taken out by the Death Riders after winning. And then he gets taken out. Christian Cage then slides in, takes advantage of the opportunity after, the Death Riders beat up Cope after the match. after Cope wins, he's all just laid out, and Christian Cage just taking advantage, like the scumbag heel that he is, takes out a prone Cope and gets the victory. And then you could do a Swerve Strickland Christian Cage match. You reignite that feud. You have Cope off of TV for a few weeks, and then Cope can come back and screw over Christian Cage for his world title. You put the belt on Swerve Strickland, and that sets up the feud between Cope and Cage. And then you could have Swerve Strickland as your world champion moving forward, putting on that heat. But I think what you laid out there is also plausible, because the one thing we know about Tony Khan is that despite how some might feel about the long-term stories, I'm looking at Tony Storm, Mariah May. He will stick to a plan, guns a-blazing, and he will see it through if he thinks that there is a strong enough conclusion to the story. And that's the thing with this big Death Riders program, is that for however we feel about it, it is the main program of AEW in terms of the all-encompassing program. And I don't think it's going to end here when it comes to the Death Riders. I think they're going to continue on through. I like the idea of a Jon Moxley versus Swerve Strickland match. I think that brings a lot of exciting, options as well. So you had me thinking here, Ben, because I was thinking of my first option. I think that was the plan that they were going to go down. But I like your option better. But I don't know if that's the one that they're going to do. That's the dilemma I have right now.
I'm in the same boat, because I think what you said makes a lot of sense, especially with Dynasty being, Swerve's crowning pay-per-view. So you could even run that match back.
Yep.
The Christian and Swerve match, I think, was his first title defense. Might have been his second. I think he actually defended the title like on Dynamite or Collision, like the week after he won it against Cesaro. Claudio, sorry. Something like that. But you could run back that match where I think it was Double or Nothing, actually, they had their match. You could run that back and kind of do the reverse where Christian's champion and Swerve is chasing. And like you said, you could kind of hotshot Swerve back into the main event that way. And then possibly build from Double or Nothing to maybe a rematch with Ospreay in Forbidden Door in the UK. Or maybe you save it and that goes all the way through to All In. So I definitely can see either things happening. And, in terms of like elaborate predictions, I'm usually wrong. In terms of regular predictions, you're usually wrong.
Yeah.
So watch, nothing will happen.
Yeah, that's right. It'll all cancel out and nothing like this will happen. Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, I all that to say, the main event, I think, could go any direction.
Yeah.
Which I think makes for an appealing conclusion to the pay-per-view.
So how about we do it as a ranking then, from 1 to 3, most likely to be the champion at the end of the pay-per-view? Because I think 1 is Mox, 2 is Christian, 3 is Cope.
Yeah, I would agree with that ranking. The other thing that is kind of looming in the background is Luchasaurus appears to be healthy again.
Yes.
So you could have Killswitch help out somebody in this show.
That could also be a thing as well. You could have that looming around. So I'm going to go with my initial idea just to kind of change it up. And as you know, I am not afraid to just take it on the chin when it comes to bad predictions at this point. So I will stick to my guns here on that one. But I like your idea a lot, mainly because I don't need a Cope Christian Cage world title program in 2025. I really don't. It just screams TNA doing Hulk Hogan and Sting in 2010. You know what I mean? They're really not that far off in terms of age with those guys. Those guys were a little bit older, but they're really not as far off as you think. So
yeah, it's deceptive because of how good Christian and Cope look for their age.
Absolutely. But also when you're trying to get something new and over, taking in a WWE feud from the last 20 years that you've already done in the company as well, I just don't love that idea as your main world title feud. As an undercard feud, sure. I like the idea of them, tag teaming again. Certainly that tag team division could use it and have those two work together again, but that's kind of how I view it. So that's the card. That's everything that's announced as we record on a Thursday and going through everything. Anything else that's on your mind here, Ben? Do you want to bury more of Busted Open Radio? Do you want to go after Dave LaGreca? Do you want to go after Tommy Dreamer? do you want to talk about Eric Bischoff and his podcast? I've continued to be denied my thoughts about Eric Bischoff here on this show and how he was wrong about the TV deal. Quite badly wrong, I might add. Like, you think I was wrong when it came to predictions? Like, he was really badly wrong. So anything else that's on your mind here, Ben?
No, I mean, those people shift the goalposts every time. And I'm all about the positive vibes. The Ottawa Senators are currently sitting in a playoff position. We've got wrestling this coming weekend, March break. The weather, despite some wonky weather here in Ottawa today, is getting better. So let's turn a corner and end on a high.
There you go. A little positivity, a little Diamond Dallas Page, positively Page, coming from you to end the show.
Don't you dare be sour.
Clap for this edition of This Is Wrestling. Thank you again, Ben, for coming on and helping preview the show, giving your predictions. I'm sure your house will be rocking when it comes to the pay-per-view. I think Ripley will be happy that I'm not there, causing havoc. I still have tried to figure out what kind of led her to be upset at me. I assure you I did nothing wrong. The only thing I could think of is that I was around a place with dogs, and maybe she smelled the other dogs on me and was like, I can't deal with this jerk. And the two other dogs smell that's on this guy. I still am trying to figure out where the heat is from.
I mean, you did get between her and a plate of chicken wings, for the record.
That's true.
You were looking out for her best interest, but she probably doesn't see it that way.
That's true. I did get between a chicken wing that could have been consumed, but maybe it was the tone of voice I use. I didn't think it was that stern of a tone of voice, but maybe that's where things faltered. But hopefully we can rekindle that relationship and start a new, maybe later on this year, the next time you host a pay-per-view party. But nonetheless, Sunday, AEW Revolution, also going to be on Prime Video, by the way. They were really pushing that hard. So that's one of the other options to have the pay-per-view, and I think that's a pretty good option as well. A lot of Prime Video users as well. Still going to have to pay the pay-per-view price, but I think still at least another option to utilize. And looking forward to this show. I think it's going to be a really, really good show. I'm really excited for this. This has the potential to be show of the year, similar to last year's Revolution, funny enough. I really am looking forward to this. And one of the big things I like about it too, 10 matches on the card as opposed to 4 in 4 hours. And then having to hear about it being a potential show of the year contender from everybody, including the Observer. But sorry, you tried to end on a positive and I got too far in, so I will stop there. Looking forward to this show. I think it should be a great show. Thanks again, Ben, for coming on, and we will chat soon. I'm sure you will be on the receiving end of some more Lever Sage biting commentary when it comes to AEW in the future. But I do appreciate you coming on, my friend.
Always happy to make that hot tag.
Thank you, sir. Reach out. Thanks for making the tag, coming in. Wildfire Tommy Rich style, maybe a little bit of Ricky Morton style coming in and doing a great job. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will see you after the AEW Revolution pay-per-view. Until then, have a good one.